And of course the look is just what I wanted. That's perfect. I don't think it could be any better, and the Graves kit was exactly as advertised, except for that one little piece you have to modify with, and you could use. Basically, these are the tools you're going to need to do this job. A couple of wrenches, 12, an 8, and a 10. I used a socket, an 8 and a 10. Some Allen wrenches, and this is what's going to make it a lot easier, because most of the time you're working in the shadows under that fender. So that's about all the tools it's going to take. And I found out you have to modify that plastic piece that goes underneath. You got to cut the end off, or the Graves kit doesn't fit. And it's a 5-minute job with a hacksaw or a table saw like I have, a little jigsaw. Anyway, if you have those tools and you have the Graves kit, pick a nice day that's nice and cool. I picked a day it was 90 degrees. Actually more than 90 degrees. But let's get at it. Now today in the shop we're going to do the Graves Fender Eliminator little project. It should take a few hours. Relatively easy job. Nothing really rocket science about it. We got the parts the other day in the mail. Good news is they delivered the parts very quickly and efficiently, unlike some of the times when you're waiting for parts to come from other suppliers. I did get these parts from Truth in Advertising, from Revzilla, and the Fender Eliminator kit from Graves. There are two. One fits the early models, one fits the late models. You want to make sure you get the right one. You don't get the one for the early models, or if you have the late model bike. This is a 2020. It's a Yamaha MT-09. And this should be a couple of quick hours in the shop, and we should be, I'm trying to share the information. We should be able to share that relatively quickly and easily. So I hope you enjoy this video. So I always try to start off my how-to videos with what I call an unboxing. Let's see what we get for our $150. Usually in the past, whenever I've had anything from Graves, it's been very nice quality. And this looks like it's going to be no exception. I want to look at the parts individually. I want to lay them all out, a clean work area, see what I have. They give you actually the little wire connectors, because you're going to have to splice this in. This is the little light that would go for your license plate. Very nice quality that they give you the little connectors even. I'm not sure what. A nice decal in case you want to put this somewhere on your bike, especially if you scratch the bike up somewhere. There you go. This is the key part of the whole job. Now there are other people that make these type of things. I researched them all out and picked the Graves one because of these blocks, and I know they were quality, and they have the lines inscribed for the chain adjustment. When you buy one and just put washers in on one side, or in my case, I was not sure I was going to do this in the very beginning. I didn't think it through all the way, but you do need these blocks. That's the key part of the kit, of this whole kit. Now, what I have looked at a video on YouTube that I don't know, I can't remember the gentleman's name that did it. There are several out there, but if you're more comfortable with printed instructions, it says you can get a PDF file, download the part number from Graves Sport, or on Instagram you can sign up for a prize award. Well, this looks like it's very nicely made. As I look at it really closely for the first time, it looks like it's probably powder coated. Very nice. Now, this is a relatively new bike. It's got about 1,200 miles on it, so I wanted, in my case, my wife bought me this motorcycle for my 75th birthday, so I wanted it to be as good as I can make it. Now, bunch of little screws. I always try to line stuff up. I'm a very methodical person when it comes to this. And another little tip that may be of value, as you take the parts off the motorcycle, I always like to leave them the way in the sequence I take them off. So if I have to put any of them back on, I know they go back. As a backyard mechanic, and we've done several very unique little things in the past. Now this looks like, because everything's sealed in plastic, it won't be all scratched up. So my gut impression here, before I even take out some wrenches and tools, is this is going to be a very nice assembly. And I'm sure, knowing other Graves products like that I said that I've dealt with, the quality is usually very good. So before we even start, one of the things that'll make this job a little bit easier, if you can get the motorcycle upright on spools, it just makes it a little bit easier. In my case, I prefer working on a motorcycle that's nice and solid. I don't want it on a side stand. And for the 1,200 miles that I've ridden the bike, I've been hoping I'd find a day to do this, and today is the day. Well, step one, of course, is key is under the seat. Release the seat. Okay, to start with, these 4 bolts have to come out. The 2 in the back. There's 2 in the back, 2 in the front. There are 4 bolts on the underside. They have to come off too, and the side panels can come off. Now it's really handy here if you have a ball end Allen wrench, because the fender does tend to get in the way on it if you have the T-handle. But a ball end socket will help make that just come off just a little bit easier. Once these 2 screws are off, side panels can come off. Now there are bolts on the bottom and clips. These little clips that you have to push the center in, and they pop out. A little tip that'll make it easier, these are the little Harbor Freight or any kind of little flashlight. It's always difficult to get down underneath there. And these basically get pushed. Now there's a bolt up here that has to come off. This whole piece can come off as one unit. Now, 2 little tips. It's not necessary to take the first piece off completely and pop all those little washers in the back. You can leave it on in one piece. Now what I do as a backyard mechanic, and I'm working on motorcycles every day here that are different, usually antique motorcycles. So here's what happens. These, I try to leave the screws right where they go, the parts that go up top. It just makes putting it all back together that much easier. And then of course I'm in sequence of here's the seat, here's the screws you would take off next. So I do everything like a sequential thing, and I can just reverse it. And by the way, another good thing, if you're not sure about this, it's always a good idea to take pictures as you take something apart, or in the vestibule world, just leave a camera running and you can see where those screws go, what had to come off before what, especially if it's the first time you're going through a project. So that's the first side. Now obviously we're just going to go around the other side, take the other side off. It's kind of almost like you don't need instructions if you're used to working on motorcycles, but I understand not everybody is, and some people are unfamiliar with modern motorcycles. See, I always work on older motorcycles. They don't have these little little Zeus fittings and things, so it can be the first time around and you kind of figure that out, but it's very quickly you adapt. So now off camera we'll just do the other side and we'll be ready to go to whatever the next step is going to be on this, and I think we're going to have to take the latch off next, but I'm interpolating this on the fly. A good little tip of something that may save you from doing some damage. There's a little tang going backward here that you want to push back before you take this and take it off. And that little tang, it's part of the taillight, and I don't want to, see, I wouldn't want, it's right here. I'll show this on a close-up. If you don't put that tang in, this part will not fit right. Now there's the little tab you want to be aware of. There's a little tab out here. These little tabs, you put the part on and slide it forward, just like, and I know this is irrelevant, but on the R1 there's a lot of body work where they have similar things where you have to push it forward and then put the Zeus fitting in. So this is like, in essence, a blind Zeus fitting. Now it may seem like overkill to basically lay out the parts with the screws in the right spot and everything, but believe me, every once in a while you get all done with something, you forget to put a screw somewhere, especially in some blind area, and then, or you see a screw under the motorcycle after you think the job is done. This is cheap insurance. I just put a towel down and lay out the parts in the sequence that I take them off, and that just seems to work for me. Again, if you're a professional mechanic, well, a professional mechanic, you wouldn't be watching this video. This helps a person that doesn't do the same redundant thing over and over and over. When every job is something new, this is a good technique and a good way to work. Then the next thing to do is with an 8mm socket, 4 bolts, hold the seat latch on. And so when you're all done, you have 4 screws. This is the latch Obviously that holds the seat on, so I'll put this aside on my sequential things as I take them off. Again, I just think that's a good tip if you're a backyard mechanic. And most of us are. If you're realistic about it, even jobs you do every day, once you lose a screw or a bolt or you get something in backwards or whatever, it just makes a job that should be fun. This is a fun job. This shouldn't be taxing and it shouldn't make you crazy. And again, the purpose of this video and all videos I think that are on YouTube, and I thank everybody that shares the information, because some of these jobs, this is not one of them, but some of them can be pretty intimidating. And when somebody else has already gone through it and they're willing to share the information, I think that's great. Now, next thing, using a 10mm socket, there's 4 bolts that hold the directional signals on. And these are the final bolts. There's 2 bolts that are going to hold that bottom piece on. And then we'll be able to pull that whole bottom piece off. Oh, here's a real good tip. Take the key out before you do this. That's why it's always good to watch somebody else go through this process before you do it yourself. Take the key out. Makes it a lot easier. So as well as taking the key out, here's another little tip that's worth passing on. These look like sheetrock screws. They thread into plastic. Don't overdo it. They're just holding this ever so slightly. And what happens if you do strip them, you've got to go find these screws that are one size bigger and re-thread it. Can be a nuisance. It's nicer if you just don't over tighten it to begin with. So here's one little thing that I found that just easier for me. I was assuming these were part of this process. They were actually bolts, so you have to be able to get underneath them. You actually have to take that back piece out before you can get a wrench on the bottom of these and take these 4 out. And those 4, it's a little tricky getting a wrench up in there. It's not impossible, but it's tricky. They hold the original, the stock blinkers. So that is the one thing I got out of sequence myself, of I guess just not paying attention, that you really have to take that bottom piece off and get in here. And that's going to allow me to take that. Well, that's going to take the whole blinker unit off, and then we're ready to start putting parts on. And that's the thing with any job like this. There's always something, the horse that has to come before the cart. And it doesn't make it that you can't do the job if you don't do this, but boy, it makes it a lot easier if you don't do what I just did, is take one part ahead of the other one before you... I thought originally when I put these on here, I thought these were attached. Obviously they're not. They're normal nuts and bolts. And they have to come off so you can take the stock blinkers off. Now, one other little tip, as you take the 2 back bolts off, the tail light is going to be released. So for right now, we can just leave that hanging on its wire and harness. But just be aware that's going to come off. For right now, we just get that out of the way. You don't need to deal with it. And I don't want to pinch any of these wires or squeeze anything unnecessarily. Take this blinker assembly off. I've kept the bolts separated. Needless to say, it'd be a real good idea to keep track of which blinker goes on which side. If you get them wrong, reverse the wires. Now, to physically release the blinkers, you need a Phillips screwdriver for this. It's one of the tools you need to do the job. These little covers are going to come right off. I want to keep the screws in order, and I want to keep all the stock parts all together. Now, you notice there's a little Velcro pouch where these wires are going to come in, and the connectors are in here. And each one is a different color, so it's a good idea to remember which one goes on which side, just to save some aggravation. So it looks like the gray one goes to the left. And what color is the other one? The black one goes to the right. And if you were doing this for the first time, you could always put a piece of tape on whichever one went on the side you were wondering about. Nice little thing, they have this little connector. And when we're all done, of course, we're going to put them back when we're done, and then put them back into this little Velcro pouch that comes on the back of the motorcycle. Now, a little tip that might be worthwhile, there's a little tab on this. These are all Yamahas, even the R1 is very similar. And there's a little thing, a little tang, you have to push that. In this case, you got to have a fingernail or something to pick it up, and then these separate. But if you just pull on them, they don't separate. So just showing this in real time here, and I don't have any real fingernails. I need to get a fingernail under there. And now this whole unit comes off as a unit. So the next part is you need to, sometimes you can use your fingernail or a needle nose plier to pull off the clip. The clip holds this into position, and now these rubber parts, if you take your thumb, you can get them to come down in there. And that's what we're looking to have, is the blinker in one piece. In the world of Yamaha, these are called the pumpkin blinkers, and I've dealt with these before. The connectors are very good, and because they're mounted in rubber, you almost never have the bulbs fail. So it's a nice way to do it. We want to use, in my own case, I want to use the original blinkers. I'm trying to keep as much of this bike original as possible. So the easiest way now is to take the Graves bracket, thread this through, and snap this piece back on, and that ensures that we have these almost exactly like they were on the original Yamaha part. Now sometimes you have to use, either if you have long skinny fingers, you can press that piece right in. Sometimes you need a small screwdriver to push it in. Either way, now we need to put the clip on, and that little clip goes in here. It's kind of self-explanatory, and then we have one side done. Now if you look real close at this part, you notice one side has tabs, one side doesn't. The tabs face out, this side faces in, just so if you did it the other way, maybe it wouldn't make any difference, but I want to replace it exactly the way it came from the factory. And these parts thread right on, so it's really kind of self-explanatory. You need to get one side up in here, and then the other side, you need a little, either a fingernail, a little screwdriver. You can pull it up with your fingers. And there we have one side on. So at one side on, we just repeat that process on the other side, and that part will be ready for the next step. Okay, we get that whole part, and that's relatively simple to do, but I think the only thing you could get wrong is to put those end little rubber containers in backwards, or get the blinkers on the wrong side, in which case you just flip the wires. Now we can use the original bolts and nuts that came with the motorcycle to put the clips on that are going to hold the license plate holder on. It's pretty self-explanatory. These only go in one way, and they have an angle built into them because the bolts are on an angle, and we want the plate to be straight. So if you put them in backwards, I don't think you can put them in backwards. Kind of self-explanatory. And when you attach these pieces, it's good to put everything in hand tight only, because you have to wiggle it around to get things in alignment. And don't forget, this is going to hold the bracket, everything I want to have with the blinkers on. Before I tighten everything up, I want everything hand tight. But these only go in one way. You can picture if you put it on the opposite side, again, I use that word self-explanatory. I realize this is why they give you the four black bolts. They replaced these bolts. I thought we'd be using them because we're not compressing the rubber grommet that's in the stock part, so we do need the 4 shorter bolts. Now I noticed one thing, even when you tighten the bolts down, there's a little bit of slop there, so I'm going to put washers underneath these bolts just to make, I don't want to force that down, even though they're cap nuts, you probably could force it down. It's just easier for me to put washers under everything. Now what I'm trying to do is figure out if one washer is going to be enough. Probably will be. Now being honest, I'm not sure if you even need this washer. It's just, it feels like, and I know these are self-locking cap nuts, they're supposed to be anyway, but it just looks like maybe this buys me a little bit of, that I can tighten them up. Yeah, let's see. And I'm just going to do this for my own benefit, truth in advertising. Let's see if I can get the 8mm on there. Yeah, I guess you can, but I want to put the washers on anyway. So the little washers are definitely an option and not necessary. Now, and we're ready to mount the blinker plate here. I always find it's the best thing when you're doing something like this. Put everything in hand tight until you know for sure everything is right where you want it to be. In this case, I don't know where these wires would normally route. Let's see, they probably route. We may have to do this over again. I don't know if they want them coming up through here, out the back. We're going to have to figure out where the appropriate routing for the wires is. So right now, again, I only have everything hand tight. So now I've still got everything that it's loose. All the bolts are still loose here. I need to get the tail light back in position to figure out the wiring routing. And I can loosen these two bolts up and get the tail light in position. And then I can start tightening everything down all at once. Now I left everything again loose because I want to figure out the last thing, the wiring. I want to have the routing exactly where I want it for the final product here. So the next thing is figure out the wiring routing. So now figuring out this wiring routing, and I don't want anything rubbing or twisting or anything. Here we go. We can, been pretty, again, not real difficult to figure out. That one's attached. And I'll check. Well, I don't really have to check. I got them right. But I'll check anyway. Anyway, this one goes here. And then that little pouch goes on top. Let's see how that works out. So the way this finalized, the wires come right up through both of them. This one is caught, the tail light is caught in the major clip here. But these, because the blinkers are in a little bit different spot, seem like they're under a little tension, but they do go through that little vinyl little cover. I'm sure there's a reason for that. They want to protect the wires, and then I can push all that stuff right back down into the little trough where it's supposed to go. And we've tested the wiring. Everything looks safe. We're ready to tighten up some bolts. Now, because this is a brand new motorcycle, I don't have the real plate yet. I have this plastic thing that they give you. So I want to make sure, number one, that the bolts are long enough, and of course they probably are. I'm just being overly cautious. And again, I don't have, until I do this, I'm not going to know for sure. We got the little thing that mounts the LED light. What will be the real plate, in fact I have it upside down. Let's put it this way and get this through here. Now obviously this has to come apart when I get the real plate, and because of the virus, I'm sure right now it's not going to come tomorrow afternoon either. So everything's been slow, the mail delivery's been slow, everything. We understand. And now basically what I can do here is tighten all the bolts down. I've got everything hand tight, I can tighten everything down. Now all the bolts can be tightened up now. And this step, I think we're coming up on having some good success. Final check of all the wiring before we go to the next step. Now, next step, we have to disconnect this wire. We have to pull some of these parts off. They have some snap connectors, a couple of bolts, and this piece here has to come off. And once that's off, we expose the wire that goes to the tail light, which now is going to be connected to the little LED that's going to be on the license plate. Now, this fastener is going to get used over again once we get the part off. So I want to keep track of this. And there's one extra bolt down under here. I have to get off with an open end wrench. That's not going to come off. This is probably the only one that's a little tricky to get off because it's hidden behind the foot peg cover. And there's one bolt right there that has to come off. That's going to be tricky. I'm going to see if I can get in there with an extension. Now, this is probably the bolt that's the most difficult to get to. You need little baby hands. There's also one of those fasteners back in there that you need a... Oh, God. Good thing we have that light. You need to be able to get in there. Really not able to show this the way I should. Okay, there you go. It's one of those pop, and it's hidden from view. You nearly can't even see it. Okay, so we got to be careful about breaking this wire now at the connection. I don't want to strip anything. I want that to come out because we're going to have to route it up here and hook it to the LED. But before you can actually remove this piece, you got to pull this wire out from the back, and a little tricky. Let's see if we can get that out of there, because this all snaps together. There it goes. Hey, look at that. Now, there's our connector right there. We're going to have to get rid of this connector because they give us, we're going to have to hook this, and this is just like the other one. We're going to have to pull it apart. Then this wire is going to get routed up into the motorcycle and hooked to the LED light that is now the license plate light. And then we can basically pull the axle out and pull this whole piece of bridge work out back here. And really looking forward to seeing what this is going to look like. Now, it's amazing how much engineering Yamaha put into this part. Now, I'm sure they have their reasons. And it is just, most people don't like it. Some people do. I'm looking forward to seeing how this is going to look. We do have the wire. I've got to cut a zip tie back there because we're going to route that wire up under here and try to make it as innocuous as possible. Now, once you remove the wire, there's a bracket up here, and I'm not sure this is going to serve any purpose at all. So what I'm going to do is just see if I can just take that out and put a washer under there or something. And one less thing to catch your finger on when you're wiping this. And this is one of the parts that after every ride it's got some mud or some dead bugs or something on it. And just be aware, on the motorcycle I'm working on, this bolt is either blue Loctited in or something. It's extremely difficult to get this bolt out. I don't know if they all are or if they just Loctited that or whatever, but it's really difficult to get that bolt out. So be aware of this. This is why it's extremely difficult to get that bolt out, because it's red Loctited in. I have no idea why, but I suspect because some part of this is the tail light wire. They don't want they don't want this to get loose. So now I can put the bolts back in. Maybe I'll wire brush off some of that Loctite in case I ever want to take this apart again. Jeez, talk about overkill. So if you release this wire now, and there's plenty of length to it, they left plenty, but to get it up through here, I need to make a fish out of a piece of wire. I want it to come up through where the ABS thing is, the lines. I want that to come up and then go into a position where I'm not rubbing it on the seat. It's actually a little trickier to get this in a good location. It isn't like a thing just push it up the back. I want it to go and make it look like the factory did it. And this is the LED. It's got a self-stick piece, and it's got, I guess, several LEDs that light this up. We've got to connect the two wires now that I've got them threaded through the frame. I didn't want to see them hanging out under the seat or anything. It worked out okay, and we just got to clip the wires and attach these, and I think we're done with the license plate. Then the last thing is the axle. So I want to get this in position. I want to leave enough what should I say, enough wire. These are the kind of jobs that help if you have real fingernails. So if you don't have fingernails, obviously you need a razor blade. Okay, so that's done. And this mounts right here. I want to leave a little slack in that wire when I make the connection. So what we basically have to do here is clip this wire and use those little connectors. Figure out how much of this wire we actually need. Let's not get it too short. I want to have some extra wire. Now, these are really nice electrical connectors here, and for the thin wire, LEDs draw almost no juice at all. So, and what you do is you push. Now that it's down one side of the wire, you go to the thin side, get this to come up over it. There's a little metal piece in the middle that keeps it together. You pinch it with a pair of pliers, which we just happen to have. And we're ready to test it. And there it is. We have our license plate. Now the last part of this job, I got to pull the axle, put those blocks in, and readjust the chain. So there's some parts of this we're not using again, but the parts we are using, I want to put back in sequence. And the first thing I guess is, it would make sense to put any of the parts that, well, we can do them just in reverse order. That would just make it easy. Okay, next thing is the seat latch. Pretty obvious, the bolts only go in one way. The bodywork, it's just a question of reversing the order we put the bodywork on. And that's why it's handy to have all the parts in a reverse order. Just makes it a little bit easier if you're not doing this every day for part of your job. Now it looks like one of the things I did incorrectly. This should have gone on before I tightened these bolts up, because otherwise if you try to force it through there, this piece doesn't really fit. I don't want to force it. I'll just loosen these bolts and slide that in there and of course make some room for the wires too at the same time. That's one of the critical things to well, this is why you watch videos, is to find out the things not to do. The thing is to get this on before you tighten up all the bolts, and of course the latch. So we've got to back that all down and get this piece in. I hope this is going to fit. I'm not going to have to trim it or something. So with the back end off, there's two possibilities here. Number one is you just leave this part off, or I think I'd have to modify it, because there's no way this goes through here realistically with well, that's the way it should, I guess. So I don't know. I'm thinking maybe what I have to do is cut this piece off. I really don't want to, but I don't see any other choice right now, unless I'm going to play with this for a little while, see if I can come up with something better. But there's just too many things all happening, and you can't get that. I don't even know, maybe you can pull one of those off, put this through. I've got to sit and dope this out. Now in taking this apart, I realize there's a critical thing. This normally has a rubber bushing in it, so if you look down here, this is flapping around now, even with the bolt tight. And this is the latch, so I don't want the latch flapping around. So what I did, I got some oversized washers. That might be a good tip too. Put those oversized washers in right in the beginning, no matter what you do. So I took this all apart. I really don't have a solution for this, but I did notice on some of the other videos I looked at, right at the end, they kind of skipped over the part of putting that back on. And maybe they had a better solution than I have. I'm going to put the bodywork on, see if I can come up with something. But these are the kind of things. I don't know if I have to cut that back piece off or not. But there's no way of getting it in with the way this piece of aftermarket stuff comes. But if you notice, the one that comes from the factory, there's nothing in the middle. So they're two separate pieces. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just one of those things. Maybe that is what you're supposed to do, and I just don't know it. So with the bodywork back on, it's pretty obvious you could ride without this piece. This piece would not be a deal breaker. But I'd like to get it on, because of course I'm trying to get this under, you're not going to see it. But what I need to do is I have to modify it just a little bit, and maybe that's the whole secret that we're going to learn at the end of this job. So what I'm going to do is take it down to my saw and just cut this piece off. I'll save it. I could always glue it back on if I wanted to, but I don't see any realistic way with the Graves thing that you can have this piece on, or you can just leave the whole thing off. And I guess a lot of people do that. I showed the before and after on the cuts I had to make to get that in there using the Graves system. And you just got to put the Zeus fasteners back in, and that part of it hopefully is done. That did work out okay. So with the Zeus fittings in, that's totally, I couldn't make that any better if I wanted to. And that looks like, if there's a way somebody can figure out how to put that little piece on the end. I showed where I cut it. It doesn't have any negative effect on the cosmetics at all. But I wouldn't want to leave that part out. I think all the mud and dirt and would get up in there. And next step is I want to see if I can just pull the axle, put the blocks on, put the nut back on, and take this piece off. And we're pretty much ready to put this puppy to sleep. This is a long day. I thought this was only going to be a couple hours. This is the better part of a day to do this. Be aware, you're not going to do this at 10 o'clock in the morning and ride at 12. So keep in mind, these are the parts that have to be precision. And this is the one thing that makes this kit worth $150. Now, because this is very similar to the R1, the way it goes together and comes apart, I'm hoping, and it's a real hope of mine, that I'm going to be able to slide the axle out and put a brick underneath the tire, and as you can imagine, it's really on there. Factory setting. What's happening, it's hitting the adjusting bolts. And there it is. Boy, Yamaha put a lot of engineering into this. Holy mackerel. This is the part that's critical though. If you pull this apart, I had originally thought I would make my own pieces and cut this and just use this piece, put it in Luciano's milling machine and mill it all there. But it's quite a substantial piece of equipment. So I'm trying to get my feet underneath the tire. I have a brick under there too. I'm hoping, hope of hope, I can slide this out, replace the block. Well, I guess we're going to see. See, this is part of it. It's your lucky day. Now here's the stock one. That comes out. This one goes on. So I must be getting tired by the end of the day. I got the wrong one on the wrong side. Keep in mind there is a left side and a right side. And the thicker of the two goes on this side, of course. When you get tired at the end of the day, and it's probably way over 90 degrees here in the shop. I got the fans on. I must just be having a cook down. All right, so no big deal. I'm going to pull it out and reverse them. That's absolutely what happens when you get tired. Let me just show this so you can benefit from my lack of technology here. They are not exactly the same. The thick one goes on the clutch side. The thin one goes on this side, and the little machined reliefs go forward. So, again, not a big deal to figure it out, but it's a lot better if you can figure it out on the first time instead of the, like I just did. So this has really been a live and learn experience, and I'm really hoping some of these things that I've learned you're able to put to good use too. And one thing, I've got to loosen this, give myself some slack. I'm going to readjust the chain using the Graves marks. This will just make getting that piece on just a little bit easier. And there's a lot of things on this job. This job, it looks real simple. It may even look real simple when you're looking at the video, but trust me on one thing. This takes the better part of a day. If you're going to do this, like I said, don't plan on going riding at lunchtime. And modifying that one plastic piece, that's a must. I don't know how you could get around that. And I've made an awful lot of motorcycle parts from scratch, and it's just get a rough idea since I did not adjust the other side. If we're in the ballpark here. And we will of course check it. Bike has 1,200 miles, and this is the first time it's needed the chain adjusted, so I guess we're good to go. Let's give that a little check. Make sure everything's, that looks about right. Now we have these beautiful marks. I'm actually on Mark 1. Let's see what's on the other side. Right on the money. That should be perfect. Now once I tighten this up, of course, I'll go back and check the chain adjustment. There's no cotter pin on this or on the R1, so this had better be the factory spec, which is, factory spec is as tight as you can make it. It's really not, I'm just kidding. I don't want that coming off. Yeah, that's right on the money. So, that's the bulk of this whole job. Now, I looked at putting the chain guard back on. It's not worth it. And most of my bikes, in fact, all of my bikes have no chain guard except for the one Kawasaki. And I kind of like the chain exposed. I like to look at it. It's a mechanical part of the bike. And remember, this is a naked bike. To start dressing it up like a Christmas tree, I don't know. You know, it's all personal taste anyway, but I wouldn't want to have too many doodads on here. It's a naked bike, and it's even more naked now. And to be honest, I'm really cooking out here. I can't wait to get inside where it's air conditioned. So these are the parts at the end of the job. We're going to store them. I'll tie them all together with some kind of a zip tie or string or a plastic bag in case I ever want to put them back, or if somebody in my circle of friends needs them or wants to buy them or just comes over and shoplifts them. And of course the look is just what I wanted. That's perfect. I don't think it could be any better, and the Graves kit was exactly as advertised, except for that one little piece you have to modify with, and you could use a hacksaw, I guess, or you could just leave it off. Other than that, I think that's a 5-star kit. So here's the bottom line. This was a pretty labor-intensive thing to do. It doesn't look like it's that big of a job. When you look at the kit, it's a big job. But anyway, it's not out of the realm of any backyard mechanic, do-it-yourself mechanic, anybody with a set of tools in a garage. And it's never a sin to ask somebody that's more experienced for some help. So, having said that, I want to thank the healthcare workers that actually made this video possible. And I want to thank all the YouTubers that share their information. And every one of us that shares, I mean, I've had a channel many, many years now. I got 1,800 videos. It's a lot of stuff. Some of the stuff I know, I look at other people's videos and I think, gee, they left out that one step I wanted to see. I try not to do that, but if I did leave a step out on this, hey, I'm really sorry. Or some of the embarrassing things, like you put the horse ahead of the cart or the gefilte fish on top of the bread instead of in the sandwich. It can happen. But anyway, I do enjoy making the videos. I do enjoy sharing them. I've gotten a set of friends worldwide from the videos that I've made. So again, I hope you've enjoyed them. And if you have one of these bikes and you're looking to do some modifications, I just started making all the modifications I'm going to make to this bike. I don't even know what I'm going to do next. But this was one thing right from the day I bought the bike. I really wanted to do this, and it's a good feeling to know it's done. So again, thanks for watching.